Can you give us a rundown of your rise through Scientology? What different posts you held, and from there?
All right. Well, in January of 1978, I began in the Sea organization, which is the million-year, billion-year contract, a lifetime commitment and more. And I went to Los Angeles. I was on a project to do purchasing for the renovations of the Cedars of Lebanon Hospital complex, which is a whole full block of Scientology service organizations. I did that for about, I guess, 9 months or something like that. And then shortly after that, I went on to the winter headquarters, which was the name of the base out of La Quinta, out in the desert, where Hubbard was, where there was a group of maybe 150 people that were putting together what they called a cinematography organization to film dissemination films and instructional films.
And this is, I'm sorry, this is L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology?
Correct.
Right, okay. Okay. And so did you meet Mr. Hubbard?
No, I never did meet him.
Okay.
He was just leaving there when I got there. In fact, one of my first, he was originally going to leave temporarily, and one of my first jobs was to help renovate his home there, because it was anticipated that he would return, but he never did return.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
And then after that, I went into what was called L. Ron Hubbard External Communications, and we handled all the communication relays between L. Ron Hubbard and the rest of the church.
Okay. And what time period are we talking about now?
This is like 1979.
Okay.
Yeah, 79 and 80.
Okay.
I did that for about 2 years.
All right. And then after that?
And then after that, and in 1981, I went on to what was called the Special Project, which was a small group headed by David Miscavige. He was actually called the operator, so everybody from the unit answered to him, and there was 4 other people in it. And our job was to find out and really investigate and get to the bottom of why there were so many lawsuits naming L. Ron Hubbard the founder of Scientology, and come up with a solution as to how to get rid of those lawsuits, because he was getting on in years, and the idea was he wanted to come back to what is now called the international headquarters, or the INT base, just outside of San Jacinto, California, where films, dissemination, and educational are made. And he wanted to get those films done and get them done. So our job was to try to get rid of all these lawsuits that were outstanding against him, so he could come back there harassment-free and live out his days working on what he wanted to work on.
Okay. Okay. And how long were you in this position?
Well, I guess I was on it for the rest of my career in a way. I mean, there was different permutations of it. It was first called the Special Project, then it was called the Special Unit, and then it was called, then we established the Office of Special Affairs to replace the Guardian's office. And then I was at Author Services, which was L. Ron Hubbard's personal literary agency, handled all his personal business, and I was a legal executive there. But again, I was still working on clearing away anything that might embroil L. Ron Hubbard in legal matters or external-facing matters, all the way up. That's all the way up through '86 now. So this is a 5-year period through there.
Okay. And when you first started this post, this is when you first encountered David Miscavige?
1981, June of 1980. Well, I actually knew him earlier casually, but not first time I ever worked with him.
I see. Okay. All right. And so thereafter, tell us about, there's some highlights of your career that we've talked about where you did some major things for Scientology. Can you talk about that, I guess the early 1990s when there were problems with the IRS?
Well, yes, the IRS was really an extension of this all-clear concept of getting rid of all the legal matters or external-facing matters that are hindering Scientology. It was tied in with about a couple of dozen lawsuits that were brought around the country naming L. Ron Hubbard, some grand juries that were outstanding from the old Guardian's Office activity that were There was one in Tampa, one in D.C., and I believe one in New York that were still trying to get indictments against Mr. Hubbard. Even after the Guardian's Office people had been indicted and convicted in Washington. So all these things sort of tied together with one another. And it was always perceived that the IRS was the most important thing to handle, because if you have tax exemption, you have a religious recognition, you're treated differently in courts. There's some level of almost immunity, First Amendment immunity, to a lot of the type of allegations that were being made. So the IRS was the big thing to handle. I mean, when I was involved in that in the late 80s, we had calculated that the IRS, considered that the churches had upward of $1 billion in liability, and the total reserves of the church were a fraction of that, maybe in the 200 million range. So literally, they could have wiped Scientology out 5 times